If this beautiful story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel to receive more stories every day. The cold wind cut through the streets of Buenos Aires that night. Among the dark alleys and worn-out sidewalks, a boy of about 10 years old walked barefoot, hugging himself in an attempt to stay warm. His name was Tomás, but almost no one remembered that. To the few who noticed his presence, he was just the boy on the corner, the one who begged for coins during the day and slept curled up under a piece of cardboard at night. Hunger was an old acquaintance. His stomach growled insistently, but Tomás had already learned to ignore the pain. However, that particular night the need was crueler. It had been 2 days since he had eaten anything other than scraps found in a trash bin. With attentive eyes, he watched the passers-by hurrying by, carrying bags full of food and ignoring his presence. Then the smell of fresh bread invaded his nostrils. He followed the aroma as if hypnotized and stopped in front of a brightly lit bakery. Inside, the attendants served well-dressed customers, and shelves filled with bread and pastries made his stomach ache even more. Tomás sighed, hesitating. Would it just be another night of hunger? But suddenly something caught his attention. A man with a calm demeanor, dressed in simple clothes, entered the bakery. He was different from the other customers. There was something familiar about him. Tomás's eyes widened when he realized who it was. His heart raced. Without thinking twice, he mustered his courage and approached the entrance. This was his chance, after all. Asking for a piece of bread wasn't that hard. Or was it? Tomás swallowed hard. His dirty, bare feet hesitated at the entrance of the bakery, while his eyes remained fixed on the man who had just entered. There was no doubt. The scruffy beard, the serene gaze, the discreet way of dressing. It was him. Lionel Messi, the man himself. The idol the whole world knew was there, just a few meters away, choosing bread like any ordinary person. The boy's heart raced. He wasn't just a soccer fan. He was passionate about the game. On the rare occasions when he managed to catch a glimpse of a television through store windows, he was mesmerized by Messi's dribbles and goals. In his dreams, he imagined himself playing alongside him, wearing the jersey of a great team, being cheered by the crowd. But in reality, he was there, hungry, homeless, without family, without a promising future. Tomás felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to approach, ask for help, say something. But what would Messi think? Would they kick him out of the bakery before he could even speak? What if Messi simply ignored him, like so many others had done, before insecurity could completely paralyze him? He took a deep breath and stepped forward. His legs trembled, but he moved with determination. He approached the Argentine star, who now held a bag of warm bread in his hands. "Sir," he murmured, his voice weak and trembling. Messi turned, his gentle eyes meeting Tomás's. The boy looked down for a moment, feeling small and insignificant in front of the legendary figure. But hunger spoke louder. "Could you give me a piece of bread?" There was a brief silence. The boy held his breath, waiting for the player's reaction. Messi looked at him for a few seconds, as if trying to understand his story just by his gaze. Then, instead of simply responding, he did something Tomás would never have expected. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. Tomás kept his eyes fixed on the ground, feeling the weight of shame and uncertainty. He was used to being ignored, shooed away, or at best receiving a look of pity followed by a shake of the head. But Messi didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crouched slightly to be at the boy's eye level and looked directly at him, as if trying to see beyond the dirty clothes and tired face. "You're hungry, aren't you?" the player asked, his voice soft, without a trace of judgment. Tomás just nodded, too weak to respond. The smell of fresh bread still lingered in the air, and his stomach growled as if confirming the answer. He braced himself to hear a sorry or a "I can't help." But to his surprise, Messi smiled slightly and did something unexpected. In a calm gesture, he grabbed a few more loaves of bread from the counter and placed them in the bag. Then, he went to the cashier and paid for the purchase without saying a word. Tomás watched every movement with wide eyes, unable to believe he would actually receive food. But then Messi left the bakery, walked past him, and kept going. The boy's heart sank. Had he misunderstood? Had Messi only paid for the bread for himself and was now leaving? The hope that had briefly blossomed began to fade. But before despair could take over, something happened. Messi stopped a few steps ahead and turned around. With a discreet nod, he motioned for Tomas to follow him. The boy blinked, confused. Was this real? Should he trust him? There was something in Messi's gaze that made him believe he should. So, without hesitation, he ran to catch up, not knowing that this simple decision would change his life forever. Tomas followed Messi without a second thought. The Argentine star walked with calm steps, unhurried, as if he already knew exactly what he was doing. The boy, on the other hand, tried to contain his anxiety and understand what was happening. Would Messi give him the bread, or was he just trying to get rid of him in a more discreet way? His heart pounded in his chest, full of unanswered questions. After a few minutes of walking, Messi entered a small restaurant on the corner. The place was simple but well lit and cozy. The aroma of hot food and spices filled the air, making Tomas's stomach twist with hunger. He stopped at the door, unsure if he could enter. He was dirty, ragged, with grimy feet and disheveled hair. Places like this usually kicked him out before he could even say a word. Messi noticed his hesitation and nodded, signaling for him to come inside. The boy entered slowly, feeling the curious glances of some customers, but no one said anything. Messi chose a table in the corner and pulled out a chair. "Sit here, kid," he said with a faint smile. Tomas obeyed, still unable to believe what was happening. Messi then signaled to the waiter and, without asking, ordered a plate of hot food for the boy. It wasn't just bread. It was a full meal. When the plate arrived, Tomas's eyes widened. A juicy piece of meat, fluffy rice, golden potatoes, and a glass of fresh juice. He looked at Messi, as if asking for permission to eat. The player simply nodded, and the boy attacked the food with voracity. Every bite was a gift, a relief for his long, empty stomach. Messi said nothing while Tomas ate. He just watched with a calm gaze, as if waiting for the right moment to speak. When the plate was almost empty and the boy began to slow down, breathing deeply after his first decent meal in days, the player finally broke the silence. "What's your name?" he asked. Tomas swallowed the last bite before answering. "Tomas, sir." "Just Messi is fine," he said, smiling. "Tell me, Tomas, and where are your parents?" The question made the boy's smile disappear. He looked down, fidgeting with his fork. His story wasn't easy to tell, but somehow he felt that Messi truly wanted to hear it. Tomas gripped the fork tightly, unsure how to respond. He didn't like talking about his past. Whenever someone asked about his parents, he heard empty words of pity, promises that were never kept, or, worse, complete disinterest. But Messi didn't seem merely curious. His gaze conveyed something rare, genuine concern. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice low and hesitant. "My mom, she got sick and one day she didn't wake up. I don't know where my dad is. He left when I was little." He paused, feeling a lump in his throat. "After my mum died, I stayed with my aunt for a while, but she already had too many kids. One day she sent me out to beg for money on the streets, and I never went back." Messi listened quietly, without interrupting. Tomas looked down, ashamed. He knew his life wasn't like other children's. He knew a boy his age should be in school playing, having a family, but that wasn't his reality. "And since then you've been living on the streets?" Messi asked after a moment. Tomas nodded. "Sometimes I sleep in a shelter, but there are always too many people. I get scared. I prefer sleeping in an alley near the square. At least it's quieter there." Messi grew thoughtful, resting his arms on the table. It wasn't just hunger. This boy had nothing, no one. And despite that, he still had the courage to ask for a piece of bread instead of stealing or doing something worse to survive. The player grabbed a napkin and wiped a bit of sauce from the corner of Tomas's mouth, like a father would do for his son. The boy was surprised by the gesture, used only to rough or distant touches. "Do you like soccer?" Messi asked, suddenly changing the subject. Tomas's eyes lit up for the first time that night. "I love it. Whenever I can, I watch the games through store windows. I wanted to be a player, but I've never really played." Messi smiled. "Never played, not even a pickup game on the street?" Tomas shook his head. I wanted to, but I never had a ball. Silence fell between them. Messi looked at the boy for a moment and then made a decision. He couldn't just give him some bread and go on with his life as if nothing had happened. That wouldn't be enough. This boy needed so much more than a meal. Messi stood up, grabbed the bag of bread and handed it to Tomas. Let's fix this. Tomas frowned, not understanding. Fix what? The player placed a folded bill on the counter to pay for the dinner and, with a calm smile, said, Everything. Tomas stood still for a moment, trying to understand what those words meant. Let's fix this. No one had ever said something like that to him. Usually people gave him a pitying look, a piece of food, and went on with their lives, but Messi seemed to genuinely want to help him. The player walked out of the restaurant, and Tomas followed, still unsure what to expect. They walked a few blocks until they reached a small park. It was a simple place with a few benches and a dirt field where some kids were playing soccer, shouting excitedly. The boy watched the scene with a pang in his chest. How he wished he could be there running with them, feeling the ball at his feet, celebrating a goal. But he had never had that chance. Messi sat on a bench and motioned for Tomas to sit beside him. The boy obeyed, still clutching the bag of bread as if it were a treasure. Tell me more about yourself, Tomas, Messi said, crossing his arms. What? Do you do all day? The boy shrugged. It depends. Sometimes I stay near the market asking for coins. When I get money, I buy bread or a piece of empanada. But when I don't get anything... He paused and looked down. I have to look for food. In the trash. Messi closed his eyes for a second, absorbing those words. It was hard to imagine a child living like that with no one to care for him. And you never thought about seeking help, a shelter, or someone who could take you in? Tomas shook his head. The shelters have bad people. They've tried to steal the little I have. And I've been beaten just for being in the wrong place. I'd rather be alone. It's safer. Messi felt a lump in his throat. He had grown up with struggles, but he had never faced anything like this. He had never known what it was like to sleep on the streets, go hungry for days, or fear the people around him. What if you could change that, the player asked, looking the boy in the eyes. If you had a chance to have a home, go to school, and maybe even play soccer. Tomas blinked, a few times confused. I don't know, that's never been an option for me. Messi gave a half smile and pulled out his phone. He typed something quickly and made a call. Tomas couldn't hear what he was saying, but he noticed his voice was firm, decisive. When he hung up, Messi looked at the boy and gave him a light pat on the shoulder. You'll spend the night in a safe place tonight, and tomorrow, well, tomorrow we'll see what we can do. Tomas felt his heart race. Was this real? After so long living in oblivion, did someone finally care about him? He wanted to believe it, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a thread of hope. Tomas felt a shiver run through his body, but this time it wasn't from the cold. Messi's words still echoed in his mind. You'll spend the night in a safe place tonight. It was hard to believe. After so long surviving on his own, someone was finally reaching out to truly help him. But why? What did Messi see in him that no one else had? The player looked up at the dark sky and took a deep breath. Come on, let's walk. Tomas stood up without hesitation and followed Messi through the streets of Buenos Aires. The city, always noisy, seemed a little quieter at that hour. After a few minutes of walking, they stopped in front of a simple but well-kept building. It was a support center for street children. Tomas had heard of the place but had never dared to enter. Some people said it was good, others said that sooner or later the kids were sent to orphanages or back to the streets. Messi rang the doorbell, and a few seconds later, a woman with graying hair and a kind expression opened the door. Leo, what are you doing here at this hour? She asked, surprised but smiling when she saw him. I need a favor, Doña Clara, Messi replied. This is Tomas. He has no one. Can he stay the night here? The woman looked at the boy and smiled in a way that made Tomas feel less invisible. Of course, dear. Are you hungry? Tomas hesitated and looked at Messi as if asking for permission. The player chuckled softly. He's already had dinner, but I'm sure he wouldn't say no to some hot chocolate. The boy smiled for the first time that night. It was a small, shy smile, but it was genuine. Doña Clara invited them in. The place was simple but cozy. Some children were sleeping on mats, while others sat in small groups, talking quietly. The smell of homemade bread still lingered in the air. Tomas sat in a chair as Doña Clara handed him a cup of hot chocolate. Messi crouched beside him and looked into his eyes. "You're safe now. You can rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk more." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to believe those words. He wanted to believe this wasn't just another fleeting moment of luck. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Messi smiled. "I promise." And, for the first time in a long time, Tomas felt he could sleep without fear that night. Tomas slept deeply, as he hadn't in years. It wasn't the soft mattress or the warm blanket, though they were comforts he hadn't known in a long time. What brought him peace was something much greater, the feeling that for the first time he wasn't completely alone. The next morning, Tomas woke up to the sunlight filtering through the windows of the shelter. For a moment, he forgot where he was. He was used to waking up on pieces of cardboard, shivering from the cold, his stomach growling. But as he opened his eyes and saw the other children getting up, memories of the previous night came back like a good dream that, surprisingly, was still real. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, when a voice called out to him. "Did you sleep well?" Tomas turned and saw Messi standing at the door, smiling. The boy's heart raced. He had really come back. "Yes," he replied, still a little shy. "Good," Messi said, sitting down beside him. "Now we need to talk." Tomas paid close attention, waiting for the player's next words. "I've been thinking—" Messi paused, as if organizing his thoughts. "You told me yesterday that you've never really played soccer." The boy nodded, unsure where this was going. "But you love the game." "I really do," Tomas said, excited for the first time. Messi smiled at the enthusiasm in the boy's eyes. "Here's the thing. I have a friend who runs a soccer academy. He helps boys like you train, study, and have a chance at a better future." Tomas's eyes widened. You think I could play there?" "I don't think." "I'm sure," Messi replied. "But there's a condition." Tomas held his breath. "You have to work hard. Soccer isn't just about talent, it's about dedication, training, discipline, and besides that, you need to study. At the support center, they help kids like you go to school. It's not just about playing soccer, Tomas. It's about changing your life." The boy fell silent, processing everything. He had never thought he'd have an opportunity like this. He had never imagined that someone like Messi would look at him and see more than just a street kid. "Do you want to try?" Messi asked, extending his hand. Tomas looked at that outstretched hand and, without hesitation, grasped it firmly. "I do," Messi smiled. "Then let's go. Today is the first day of the rest of your life." And with his heart racing and a flame of hope burning inside him, Tomas stood up to follow his new path. Tomas could hardly believe what was happening. Just a few hours ago, his only concern had been finding a piece of bread to stave off his hunger. Now he was about to step onto a real soccer field with the chance to train like a professional player. Messi took him to a small sports center on the outskirts of the city. The place wasn't luxurious, but it had everything a young, aspiring player could need. A well-kept field, organized locker rooms, and most importantly, a coach who seemed to genuinely care about the kids there. As they entered, a tall, strong man with a whistle around his neck approached. "Leo, what a nice surprise," he said, shaking Messi's hand firmly. "Fabian, this is Tomas," Messi introduced, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's never played soccer before, but he's passionate about the game and wants to learn." The coach looked Tomas up and down, assessing him. "Never played, not even on the streets?" "No, sir," the boy replied, trying not to seem intimidated. Fabian crossed his arms and nodded. "Well, it's never too late to start, but you'll have to work hard. Nothing comes for free here." "I'm ready," Tomas said, determined. The coach smirked. "We'll see." Fabian called one of the boys from the team and handed a ball to Tomas. "First, show me how you kick." Tomas took the ball and placed it on the ground. His heart was pounding. He had never trained before, but he had spent his whole life watching players on TV screens through store windows. He closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and kicked with all his strength. The ball shot out fast, but without direction. Flying high above the makeshift goal, some of the boys laughed. Tomas felt his face heat up. "That was a good kick," Messi said beside him. "But soccer isn't just about strength, it's about precision." Fabian smiled and looked at the star. "Want to give him some tips, Leo?" Messi nodded and grabbed another ball. "Come with me, Tomas, let's start from scratch." And for the first time in his life, the boy had a real teacher. The following days were a roller coaster for Tomas. The soccer field became his new home, and the routine that once seemed so distant now became his reality. At every training session, Messi was there by his side, guiding him, correcting him, teaching him not just technical skills but also values Tomas had never imagined learning. Messi showed him how to be disciplined, how to stay focused, and most importantly, how to believe in himself. At first it was hard. Tomas didn't have control of the ball, didn't know how to pass accurately, and his shots still soared into the sky. But Messi never let him give up. He always encouraged him to try again, to improve a little every day. He told him that success didn't come from one big moment, but from a series of small daily victories. And over time, Tomas began to understand that. In addition to training, the boy also started attending school with the support of the shelter. Sometimes he arrived tired, his hands sore from training, but he didn't give up. There was something inside him now that motivated him to keep going, the chance for a better future. He knew that with effort, he could change his life. There were tough moments, of course. Sometimes he felt lost, insecure, thinking he wasn't up to the opportunity he had been given. But Messi was always nearby, offering words of encouragement and understanding. He knew what Tomas was going through, having overcome his own struggles to get where he was, and little by little, Tomas gained confidence. His ball skills improved with each training session, and he began to shine in games. The other boys on the team started to see him differently, no longer as a boy without a future, but as someone who truly had something to offer. In a decisive match, the team was losing 1-0, and the game was nearing its end. Tomas was on the bench, waiting for his turn to play. Messi approached him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said with a smile, "Now's the time, Tomas. Let's show what you've learned." Tomas stepped onto the field with his heart racing, but now with confidence. When the ball came to him, he didn't hesitate. With a quick move, he dribbled past an opponent and, from outside the box, took a precise shot into the corner of the goal. The ball went in, and the entire stadium erupted in applause. At the end of the match, the team won, and Tomas was embraced by his teammates. Messi was there, smiling with pride. "You did well, kid," he said. Tomas, his eyes shining, looked at Messi and for the first time said something he never thought he'd say, "I'm good enough, aren't I?" Messi smiled and replied with the same certainty he always had, "You always were. You just needed someone to show you." That goal wasn't just the victory of a match. It was the victory of a lifetime. And looking toward the future, Tomas knew there was still much to learn, much to achieve. But with the help of Messi and everyone who believed in him, he finally had the chance to write his own success story. And that, for him, was more than enough. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like so more people can discover stories that change lives.